All right, I think we can go ahead and get started today. I know a couple of people are going to be joining us late this afternoon, but I just want to welcome everybody to our 7th TAC meeting here. Just to let you know, today we are going to be actually taking public comment online with some recent changes to public comment via House bills. We are now taking those comments online. So with that, I think we have a new, I just want to introduce you to one of our new project leads, Kate Rogers from MIG and APG. Those two companies recently merged. And then I think we can just do a quick round of introductions so she knows folks in our room today. So Bruce.
Hi, I'm Bruce Coleman. I'm Economic Development Manager with the City of Sherwood. Nice to see everybody.
Michael.
On the unmute, I'm Mike Weston. I'm the City Manager of King City.
Ryan.
Ryan McKinster, Director of Policy and Government Affairs for the Home Builders Association.
Joe.
Hi, Joe Dills with MIG and APG. And hi, good to see you.
Jessica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Pells. I'm a Senior Transportation Planner with Washington County.
Elle.
Hey everyone, my name is Elle Allen. I'm here representing Clean Water Services.
Julia.
Hello, Julia Hyduke, Community Development Director with the City of Sherwood.
Glenn.
Hey, Glenn Bolin. I'm the Interim Planning Manager at ODOT Region 1.
Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Schweitzer, Community Services Director for the City of Sherwood.
Joy.
Joy Chang, Senior Planner with the City of Sherwood.
And Matt.
Matt Kriege, Washington County's Economic Development Manager. Good afternoon.
And last but not least, and I'm going to probably butcher your name here.
Is it me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Salmia. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, yes. I'm Salmia. I'm a planner and urban designer with Walker Macy Landscape Architects. Nice to meet you all.
Great. So if we just want to get started here, were there any edits to the meeting summary from last month, 2 months ago in December? Okay, seeing none, I think we're just going to move on to public comment. And we have Marianne Highland representing the Eastview Neighborhood Association today. Marianne, you're going to have 3 minutes, and around the 30-second mark, I'm going to hold up this yellow piece of paper, just so you know you have around 30 seconds left.
Okay, you tell me when to start.
I will here, just 1 second. All right, are you ready? Oh,
right after I take this sip, hang on 1 second. 1 second. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
Members of the TAC, I thank you for your time today, city officials as well. Some of you we've met with previously. My name is Marianne Highland, and I'm the chair of the Eastview Road Neighborhoods Association's Sherwood West Concept Planning Team. I'm presenting today as a member of the association, not a lawyer, although I am a lawyer. I'm presenting as a member of the community. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our community. We have over 50 members living in 21 homes. We reside both on the east and the west side of Sherwood Road. We're a longstanding community. We've existed for decades. Many of us have lived here for over 20 years. And we are united around a common interest in maintaining the safety of our neighborhood and the well-being of our residents. We have a diverse neighborhood. We're a thriving neighborhood. And our neighborhood is centered along Eastview Road. The Eastview Road is literally the center. It's the place where we walk, where we convene, where our children walk to get to the school bus. We've got homes closely aligning the road on both the west side and the east side. And there's a neighborhood on the west side off of Quail Lane that accesses Eastview Road to get to and from Edie Road. I submitted written comments, which you should all have. And so this is intended to provide a high-level overview. So I encourage you all to read my written comments. I want to first acknowledge the death of the 2 young girls who were killed by a car on Edie Road on Sunday evening. And I want to say that our association offers our deepest condolences to the family members of those children. We mourn with the family as fellow classmates and community members and parents as well. What unites us, whether we live inside or outside of the city limits, is a desire for safety for our children, our families, and our communities. And I hope we can all agree that planning for future growth should center safety for everyone as a priority as we move forward. And that is why we are participating in this process. We want to share with you some major safety concerns we have, among others. Number one is the feasibility of the proposed bypass through Eastview Road. The grade heading to Chapman is 19% and Eastview is 12%. So it's not feasible in that regard. I see that am I totally out of time?
No, keep going.
Oh, okay. How much time do I have left? Sorry.
No, it's okay. About 30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. All right, so I'm going to make it quick. Coming through Eastview Road, it's not feasible, it's unsafe because those grades are unsafe. You would totally decimate our neighborhood. You would condemn 7 homes. You would displace numerous families. You would create a hazardous, unsafe navigation at the intersection of Eastview and Edie because of the high incidence of traffic accidents that have occurred there. And there are lower cost available alternatives. We believe that Elward is your solution. There are hardly any homes along that stretch of Elward between Edie and Highway 99. And only 2 of them face the road that would have some impact. You have large expanses of pasture. We believe you could make it safe. You could put in bike paths on both sides, sidewalks, and multi-use paths, and maintain Elward as your north-south connector. So is that my time, Erica?
Yeah.
Okay, so
if you want to have another sentence to wrap up.
I just want to say, we come in peace, and we are here to support you in creating a safe expansion plan. We hope that you rely on us as a resource in your future planning. We want to be engaged, and anything that has to do to impact our community, we definitely want to be able to weigh in. We think we can help you think through things that maybe you hadn't thought of by virtue of the fact that we've lived here so long. So I thank you again for your time. We will stay in touch.
Thank you for your comments, Marianne. So moving on, we have an update of the Western Edge North-South connector. Kate, would you be able to
yes, I will share my
one of the maps here?
Make sure I'm getting the right one. Okay. Which version would you like to look at? This one?
This version.
Okay.
This would be great.
Should I zoom in a little on the map?
Sure, sure.
Okay.
So at our last TAC meeting, I had talked about how the CAC this last fall kind of requested us to look at another kind of north-south, access, in the Sherwood West area. That would connect to Edie and down ultimately to Highway 99 or close to. So staff, we went ahead and we kind of looked at, some proposals and where a road could go. And we came up with this north-south connector option. This would be a local city road. It connects from down south to Chapman, and ultimately it would connect to Edie. And we have two options here. Option one was shown at the last TAC meeting, and it utilizes Eastview Road, just north of Chicken Creek. So it's that straight line that utilizes Eastview Road. And alternatively, we have come up with a second option here that would veer a little to the east and then connect up to Edie Road. We're going to be showing these two alternatives to the CAC tonight to gather their feedback on whether or not what their preferred option is, or if we should present these preferred options out to the community in an open house to get more feedback. But I just wanted to share with the TAC where we are in regards to this north-south connector road today. Does anyone have any questions? Bob, I know that you're on the line. I don't know if you have anything else to say. Or Julia?
I don't have anything else to say at this time. Sorry, thanks.
Jessica?
And neither do I. I think it's self-explanatory.
Jessica?
Thank you. I just had a couple questions on how the city anticipates this would be funded. It seems like because, or at least the location of it on this map would only be development on one side, so a half street, and then rural reserve on the other side. So I'm wondering if there might be a better option to bring it
all into the city boundary. Yes, and
bring
we
it
have
more
definitely
fully into the city, so there can be development on both sides of the road that would contribute to funding it.
Yes, we have definitely thought about that. That's probably the way that we're going to be moving forward with such a road, to help with the funding. And also on another note, Jessica, in regards to roads and connections over streams and natural crossings, I have started to reach out to DLCD and the Army Corps just to, to discuss the concept plan, what we're proposing, and to really figure out the next steps as far as, environmental permitting.
Oh, good. I'm really glad to hear that, because I think our perspective is still concerned that this is a feasible alternative for Elwert, whereas Elwert already exists and can be improved as a 3-lane arterial. So I look forward to hearing more about that.
Ryan.
Yeah, well, Jessica beat me to that first question, was the funding issue. I guess along those lines, it'd be hard for me to support that without understanding the funding as well as the traffic impacts. What kind of traffic study has been done to see if we need this or if it's going to be used. I guess the other issue is depending on how that funding is accomplished. If you bring it into the boundary and a large percentage of that falls on that new housing as an SDC, it kind of breaks the process of trying to create some affordable housing or addressing housing issues. Depending on where that line is of how much is a community responsibility and how much is new housing responsibility, it can make it really difficult to achieve any affordability in this area. I've seen it in other areas when new roads came in, basically it priced out the housing and the development didn't go through. So that's a big concern for us.
Any other questions before we move on? I don't see any. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
Okay, hi, everybody. Next agenda item is our main one. And let's go up one slide, I think, if we could, Kate. we'll start right there. We have included design studies in this packet and for your discussion today for several reasons. One is to test some of the specific public uses that have emerged in the discussions of the project. And specifically, those are a community park, a potential middle school, and a potential elementary school. Each of them require pretty large acreages and flat ground for most of the site. And there's a kind of a finite supply of both of those. So we wanted to take a little bit closer look. Secondly, there was a discussion in December with the CAC. You had the same topic, but they kind of took interest and had a bit of a positive reaction to the discussion of master planning Sherwood West for the ultimate community plan. They had requested that we bring the examples of Villebois and what's gone on in Frog Pond in the Wilsonville area, and generally liked the potential to try and be pretty specific about the quality of the walkable areas. And so generally, we also thought it would be a good idea to insert some design thinking into the definition of scenarios we've been doing. So for all of those reasons, we've prepared these studies, and I'll sort of underline the word studies. These are not proposed plans. But what we want to do in our discussion today is learn from these, get your reaction from them, share some of our observations, and then see if we can start to identify some of the pieces that ought to be carried forward into the alternatives that we'll hopefully be preparing for your review at the next meeting. And we've, as you saw in the packet, we've focused in on the central area here. So the first thing to do was to prepare this drawing, which took a look at just how much land is there in kind of what shapes and sizes in this central area. So to get everybody registered, the high school is shown in blue, obviously. On its right is Elwood Road. Just above the high school is Haiti Road. Those exist, and Kruger Road on the south side of the high school, of course, is an existing road. The rest of the road network within the Sherwood West portion of the map would be new. So this builds off of the work of last year, the potential for the extension of Hadley from where it currently exists at Elwert west into the study area and then south all the way to Chapman is a pretty important connection. It provides a continuous north-south route. It connects this community over to neighborhoods to the east and ultimately over to Highway 99. Hadley's an important street. You remember our discussions of the realignment of Elwert. So that is shown in these drawings. It's been expressed as a strong preference by the CAC. And so when you put the road configurations together with the flat ground, with the topography, you end up with the blocks of land as are shown on this map. And it's basically 20s and 30s, a few 10-acre-ish parcels that are shown here. Again, why these areas? The central portion of the plan is where the flat ground is. It is not all flat, of course, but it's where kind of the larger blocks are, except for the northern employment areas. And this is also where it's most feasible to extend existing utilities. So the previous phasing work has identified this area as being the early phases of development for Sherwood West. Okay, so that sets the stage. I should mention that we included the trail that has been discussed along Chicken Creek. So the large green area of Chicken Creek on the south side of it is envisioned to be a Chicken Creek regional trail, and then the other rest of the trail network that basically wraps around the area. So let's go to the first of these studies here. This one takes a look at, we're focused in the northern study area, which we've called the North Village. And this one takes a look at what if an elementary school was located in that area. And we've placed it along Elwert and adjacent to the high school. That really isn't the only place it could be located. I think there's additional sites both north and to the west, but for these purposes, have placed it next to the high school as a beginning look. We've included the community park acreage, which sort of the ballpark size that's desired has been ballparked at 20 acres. You can see that our measurement here is a little bit under that. Community parks do have a relationship to their adjacent natural areas, of course, so there's sort of a little bit of borrowed open space to the west and to the north, but this particular option for the community park would be just a little bit under 20 acres. And then this is our first take at starting to draw in some of the land uses. So we have included some multifamily here and some middle housing labeled MF and MH. The sizes here are really a first cut at them just for scale comparison. These are about 10 acres of multifamily and a 10 plus 3 or 4, 9 plus 3 or 4 middle housing component. We're starting to do the calculations for how much of each housing type is needed. You can think of this as probably being about a quarter or a third of those land uses that would be needed to meet the required targets of 50% attached housing. And then the rest of the colored area is what we've called residential of all types. It'd be a mixed residential. So single family detached housing is allowed, but under HB 2001, we all know that all middle housing types would also be permitted. So that's the color scheme. And this particular look at it says, what if there was a village plan that was basically anchored by an elementary school north of Haiti, had some attached housing near it, and then feathered out into the other housing in the remaining part of the village. This is all very kind of walkable and close to each other. There's a little bit of topography down to that northern bubble there that kind of looks like a sand trap, one person called it. But the part of the Chicken Creek area that is buildable there is still very close to everything and easily accessed. Soumya, anything that you would add to this description?
No, I think that's a great overview. I would also just point out we're trying to think with all of these about potential locations for open space other than the community park program piece. So for this example, potentially if there's neighborhood park to be included in this village, it might make sense to co-locate it with the elementary school or anchor it to the kind of regional trail along Chicken Creek. And then one other thing to point out about the trails shown on the map is that those are just sort of concepts for the major off-street trails, but all of the streets, the local streets would be, you know, really walkable, bike ped friendly, safe streets. So I think that's all I have to add.
I should back up a little bit. I think the way to organize our time here is I'm going to describe a couple more drawings and then we can take your questions and kind of clarifications. And then you saw in the packet, we had some specific discussion questions and we'll get to those and take notes as we go. Okay, so that's concept one. Concept two says, what if the middle school was part of this area? Does it fit? Where might it go? And in this particular version of it, we have retained the elementary school and then sort of rearranged the housing accordingly. And the community park moves down to the lower area near Chicken Creek. So what does all that do? It creates quite a continuous campus of school uses And in coordinating with the school district, this would probably not be their top choice. The schools have pretty similar commute patterns. They're already seeing some access issues and congestion issues on Elwert associated with the high school. And so all three of them together are something that they think may not be the best combination. I see your question in the chat, Jessica. The intuitive answer from the school district is that they need acreage within Sherwood West ultimately for a middle school and a high school. They want to reserve judgment on that need until we have land use numbers and numbers of households. And they're going to do a little bit more quantitative look. But they made a specific request of the CAC that 50 acres be set aside for those two uses. And this test says if one of them is going to be 40, it kind of doesn't work too well with this land area. So anyway, a couple of schools, the middle housing takes a little different configuration. Community park is kind of interesting in this, in that the open acreage and the green shading is pretty indicative above what's open versus what is treed, is about 14 acres, but it has a much kind of closer relationship to the natural resource lands around it. Still a little undersized from the 20 target, but this is sort of what we see here for that use in that location. Let's see. What did I miss here, Samia? What would you add?
I think that's probably a good summary. This one, you'll notice we're not showing another little neighborhood park, just because so much of the land of this particular village is shown in use for the middle school and the elementary school. So some of that school property could also function as some de facto open space in the neighborhood, but that's just something to consider.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the third one, and then we can kind of take some discussion on these. So concept 3 holds the two schools and the parks in where I just described them, but does a little different configuration for the multifamily and the middle housing. The multifamily being oriented a little bit more in relationship to the realignment or extension what would you call it? The realignment of Edie Road and the natural resource areas on the other side of it. So this is just sort of a slight variation on the one that I just described. Anything to add to this, Soumya?
I think if you just flip back to the previous one real quick, the main distinguisher is just thinking about what is the edge along Elwert in that new alignment. Is it kind of middle housing stepping up to multifamily toward the schools? Or then if you click to the next one, maybe there's more of a concept of spreading the density from a east to west kind of a transect. So more of the multifamily housing coming up near the Greenway, near the north. And then as you move west, there's kind of sprinklings of more density along the edges.
Okay. All right. So we have some specific questions to pose, but let's just start with any clarifying points. I saw another chat. Let's pick up. 50 seems like a lot if rule of thumb guidelines are 10 acres for elementary school and 25 for middle school. In other areas, that I agree with that, but I'm kind of reporting out what we heard from the school district here locally. Okay, any questions about, we can flip back and forth to any of these three. What's where issues that you see? Otherwise, I can kind of guide us through some specifics. Ryan, go ahead. Oh, and you'll have to unmute.
Every time, Joe, every time. Um, so out of three concepts, we have two with the middle school and elementary school right there, where it sounds like the school district doesn't really think it's a good idea. So why are we looking at that if they don't think it's a good idea for the majority of these proposals?
Well, their specific comment was all three schools. So we'll learn a little bit more tonight when we talk to them about if it was just the middle school located there. And like I mentioned, there's sort of different ways to mix and match these ideas. So these are really just tests. But it was all three schools that they cited the concern about. And we may in fact hear that the middle school is kind of the key one to look for an alternative location. The other thing is, it's just a sequence of the conversation. We prepared maps, we've coordinated with them, and then of course we've gotten to this point of discussion right here. So there wasn't a cycle of revision in between. We're kind of doing that as we talk to you all. Glenn, go ahead.
Yeah, just one question, one note. I have seen other places where there's some benefit to having elementary school and high school in proximity. There's a lot of volunteerism that can happen from high school kids working in classrooms, helping teachers. I know from just personal, haven't seen that with my kids and others. So I like the idea of having those somehow similarly located. That would probably indicate being proximate rather than across, down a busy street. I'm thinking the example in my mind is my neighborhood is Ida B. Wells High School with Reiki Elementary, just down the slope. It works really, really well. So I would think about that as you look into design. I think it also, from a school district maintenance standpoint, means that I'm having to get maintenance vehicles onto the public roadways as much and just move things back and forth as they do their work. My question, maybe this doesn't matter, but do you have an indication from the district, Joe or Kate, is the attendance boundary for these schools all or predominantly expected to be in Sherwood West? Or, my concern, of course, is having to cross the highway.
Erica, have you heard any of that in your discussions with Jim?
That is a great question. And I haven't touched base with Jim about that specific question, but that's a question we will raise.
Okay. Let me take you through a couple of specific questions here, get your feedback, and then we can sort of raise any issues as we go. Looking at these three concepts, let's start with the elementary school. Do you agree? Do you think it's a good idea to plan for this elementary school to be within this village area? Any comments on it? Any thoughts, pro or con? Folks are kind of neutral on it. All right. I'm going to burst this into its pieces. I see a couple of thoughts coming in through chat. That's great too. So let's talk about middle school here. The acreage is, they did say it could work, but it's a little smaller than they were thinking. It's a little bigger than we've seen in other communities. Let me ask the what if question. Two-part question. One, do you think it's a good use in this village? Secondly, if not here, then where? And let's go up a couple of maps if we could, Kate. We're gonna have to navigate a few pages here. Sorry, down a few maps. I'm looking for an overall map. I think it's the last one in the series, might be about page 15 or so. Keep going. There you go. Oops, back, there you go. So where the words North Village are is where we've drawn that middle school. If it doesn't go there, where would it go? Michael?
I may have missed it when you were talking earlier, Joe, but in the evaluation, was there actually a need for the middle school? Because like Jessica made a pretty good point in the chat, like they just took over the old high school over there, which is a pretty large facility, especially for a middle school. And they still have Eddie just up the way that I think they're still using as a middle school as well. So I mean, what's the real need here would be my question for a middle school. I could see another elementary school and they have a brand new high school. So now they have 2 middle schools as well.
So just to clarify that there's only one middle school. The middle schools were combined into the one, and Edie, there was the Ridges schools and they basically were combined into one large elementary school. So there's only one middle school now.
And
So
what's the capacity of that, Julia? Do you know?
Oh, I don't. Sorry.
So assume for this discussion that what they said they mean, that there's a need for a middle school. And our job is to see whether Sherwood West can accommodate it, how would it accommodate it. I'm just going to throw out an observation is that if it doesn't go in the North Village, it doesn't fit in the South Village. And therefore we're looking at the areas north of Chicken Creek as the location, which means it would be either kind of just to the west of where we've labeled Elwood Road, or utilize some of the mixed employment land.
I got a
So
question. You go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things I think I'm trying to visualize in my head right here are travel patterns. While with the logic you're saying, Joe, makes a lot of sense. Like, boy, having everything together, we don't having to cross through Chicken Creek with every single trip is kind of nice, So you kind of get the same patterns, and especially if you're doing a safe route program where you've got a few key walking routes, that can be nice. The other side of me is wondering about distribution. On the other hand, if Roy Rogers then provides a nice arterial linkage into the middle school, as opposed to having everything try to come off of that intersection by the high school. So I'm kind of a couple of minds there, and I think I would probably need to see a little data to know. But I think that what we want to avoid, obviously, is the local trip needing to use the highway.
Yep. Okay. Other thoughts, opinions? Bruce, go ahead.
So my question is, the best property for job development is going to be the flatter property on the north, along Shoal, Sherwood, etc. So what I'm wondering is there an interest on the part of the school district? And I don't know where, we're trying to create as much job plan as we can, of course. Is there an interest on the part of the school district to look at the middle school as relating to on the job, not on the job, but career pathway programs, as is done in some other places? I happen to be aware of a program that Water Agency was at least looking at in conjunction with a middle school in another community, in terms of career training opportunities for engineering and those kinds of things. So I'm wondering if there might be a take on that, and if so, I'm wondering. And again, I hear what ODOT is saying, but I'm wondering if there might be something west of Elwood that could make some sense, so it doesn't get in the middle of the main body of the job creation area. Just a thought.
Let me flip that, Bruce, and sort of tap into your marketing expertise. Is it a positive for trying to market an industrial area that there's a middle school close by and we've got these relationships with the students and so on? Any comparables or things come to mind for that relationship?
In theory, maybe, but I'm not sure how the market really does take that. And we don't know exactly how this jobs area is going to grow. I mean, certainly my hope is that we're going to get suppliers to the semiconductor industry, et cetera, and there's going to be a tremendous job training need because where is this workforce coming from for future prosperity? But I don't know. I mean, I've not had any discussions on that with anyone, so it's still just theoretical to me. And I think there would have to be really some further investigation in terms of how the market would see that. Would it be a pro or a con? Or would it be just in the way of having job growth?
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts on the middle school as a piece of the puzzle here? I know I'm breaking it into its parts, but these are actually pretty useful things to have some guidance on. Let's go up a few maps and talk about the community park. And Karen, I would welcome your impressions of the three choices, either the one shown here, or let's go down a page, or the next two utilize that more interior area. Any thoughts? Karen Schweitzer, are you still with us?
It's a little bit hard for me to tell. I mean, the map that you have up right now. That's okay. With it being, looks like it's much more in the wetlands. It doesn't seem like quite as usable space, or potentially not as many options or flat land as the map that showed it up against Elwert. At first glance, I would prefer the Elwert Edie location. Just seems like there'd be more flexibility, but maybe that's suitable space down below. It's just a little bit hard for me to tell what the terrain is like.
It's fair. I can describe it generally. It's fairly flat down there. It is sloping down towards Chicken Creek, but it's fairly flat, looks usable for ball fields.
Okay.
You have to move some dirt around, but there could be some sports field component. And as far as our inventory information, there aren't not wetlands there. It's wet, of course, in the creek itself. Soumya, anything to add about sort of the geography of that more interior choice?
Yeah, I agree, Joe. I think it looks on this map as though it's kind of down in the wetland, but it's actually kind of like a clearing with groves of trees surrounding it. And the topography is not as steep in that zone. So I can drop a link to the kind of pin drop on Google Maps so you can all see
that'd be great.
Where that kind of sits. And I think, either one of these locations, this one maybe more so, being integrated within the natural area corridor of Chicken Creek provides some unique opportunities for trail connectivity. Whereas if you located on the west side, where there are going to be streets, public streets intersecting between the kind of creek and greenway and the park, that's a different condition. But I'll drop that pin drop in the chat real quick.
Yeah, I can see how for trails and that connectivity, which is very high, at least on the Parks Board's list of priorities, that does appear to be better for sure.
This is Glenn. I was having hand up to say that to kind of hit on that same Soumya's point there. I was thinking there's probably a lot more nature play opportunity with the Chicken Creek location. And then I also wondered, I don't know how the school district operates with their fields, but do you have enough structured play space, soccer, football, basketball, whatever, baseball, field space already available through the schools, and maybe that trail connectivity and nature play component is kind of a unique gem you couldn't really pull off many other places in the region. So it could be a real benefit for the neighbors.
Okay.
And we do have a need really for both. I mean, I love the idea of the nature play. I think this could be a unique area. We used to have access to all of the school district fields, and we no longer do. They ended that relationship in that IGA. So we're down to Snyder Park being the only city fields that we have at this point.
Okay. One more closure on Community Park, Kristen, is that it's sounding like there's some reason to continue to study both of these choices that we've shown on the map so far. And we are working towards 3 alternatives. So maybe as we move ahead over the next month, we could kind of work with you for what might be a 3rd choice somewhere else in the study area.
That'd be great.
Okay. Unless you know of another one right now you want to share.
Well, not necessarily, not within this specific study area,
Okay.
not in the North Village.
Okay. All right.
Joe?
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you do not have the park in that little area, obviously it's not a depression, within the Chicken Creek area, I guess, you're otherwise you're considering that residential possibility. I mean, just the one concern I would say is if you're putting the community park up off the road in concept 1 as opposed to concept 2, concept 2 is going to be, or I mean, concept 1, that developable land in that park area is going to be more expensive because of that for cost for infrastructure. If you're trying to address housing costs, it'd be more appropriate to have that housing up on the road where you have the community park in concept 1 rather than here. So that's a consideration.
Okay, I didn't hear all of that, but are you saying that you like residential in the, I got to figure a name for this, the bubble area next to Chicken Creek. You like the idea of residential there?
No, opposite.
Opposite.
Yeah, yeah. So concept 1, let's make it easy. Concept 1, I think we would prefer, which is, what is it? Concept 2 to concept 1, since we have them both up there, just for the infrastructure costs, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I had a similar thought. I was kind of on the pros and cons side of the park location. That is, I'm assuming it's going to be some fairly expensive infrastructure for the number of units, or for the park. Whatever goes in there is going to be expensive because of the physical challenges getting infrastructure.
One other access consideration comes to mind about, let's go back to concept 1, about residential in that area. It really basically only has one way in with a road. And you might be able to figure out another way to get an emergency access from the east or something. But it's difficult to provide multiple ways in, which we try and do for emergency services and circulation. So that's sort of another vote for concepts 2 or 3. Okay. Great. Let's finish North Village by getting any impressions you have about the housing shown in this area. We have taken what we think is going to be a portion of the multifamily and middle housing component of the housing spectrum. It'll actually be the smallest land areas required. But looking at the North Village, and you'll see in the South Village, for some component of multifamily and middle housing, because it's close to transportation, it would be close to services. The idea of being able to sort of get on your bike and ride down Hadley and get to other places in that direction is proximate, and it's relatively flat for affordability of construction. So that's the rationale. Any thoughts on the housing choices shown on this plan, or the other, or concepts 2 or 3? Glenn?
I'm a big person talking all the time. I'm trying to wait. I think I would, if I had my druthers, I'd break up the multifamily into smaller pieces. I think if you have what looks like probably a 10-acre chunk, it makes it easy to develop and market with a suburban style apartment complex. But to me, the real health of the neighborhood comes from having the mixed incomes and mixed housing styles. And so if you broke that into several pieces, place it around, you could easily do 1-2 acres at a time. That is, I think, financially viable and I think a better community.
Okay. All right. Other thoughts on the housing?
Well, Joe, this is Ryan again.
Yeah.
So but I know we're at this preliminary stage and stuff, but how, I mean, you got these zones designated multifamily middle housing, which can go anywhere. How do you achieve that? Is that going to be creating special zoning for that, or you're just gonna have a minimum density and you're going to assume that's going to turn into middle housing?
Yeah, thank you. I forgot to mention that is that the sort of underlying assumption here is that a special zone that would not include single family. It would include the middle housing choices other than single family, which under the law, you're allowed to then focus and create a special zone. It's a bit of speculation, but a theory that if you do provide that special zone, that area would be would utilize that market demand, and there would be less market demand for middle housing in the rest of the lower density zones. That is an untested theory. It's just a possibility with this particular strategy. And it depends on what side of the housing spectrum you're on. If you're favorable towards having lots of middle housing mixed in with single family, you may not want to do that. The CAC is a little bit at the other end of the spectrum. They're very concerned about having lots of middle housing throughout the plan. So we have suggested this special zone.
So I guess there's a couple of things. Number one, leading into Glenn's comment, now that you've answered it that way, and how we started this conversation with Billabong and Frog Pond West, as well as obviously some other community groups we sit on together, Joe. This looks like kind of actually in direct contradiction to how those are planned. You don't have middle housing here, and then multifamily here. They're interspersed. That's the idea of that kind of concept of planned community is you have this block, that block, this block. So you don't do it by zone. Number two, wow, I can't just, I'm a little gassed. I heard that there is a desire to use zoning by incentive or less desire to keep middle housing out of single family. I think that's what I just heard. There's desire by the other committee to do that. And that is in direct contradiction to the idea of what 2001 is supposed to do. We're trying to create middle housing opportunities for all housing types. So we're not segregating once again. And this sounds a little bit like we're trying to create segregation again through a different mechanism. Did I hear that wrong?
Well, you heard the concern right. That the concern at the CAC, and Erica, I'll ask you to kind of add to this, is that they understand that middle housing will be allowed in single family, anywhere where there's single family. The potential for there to be far more total housing units is kind of at the heart of the concerns that we've heard. So the tool that has been suggested here is that a middle housing zone would be created. Personally, from my experience, if a master plan was required for this North Village, you could totally take the middle housing component and require it to be woven throughout the whole thing. This blocking of acreage here is not intended to be a highly detailed plan. What you would want is a little bit more like you see in Villebois, where you literally have single block faces that are one type of housing, and then the next block is another. Yeah. We're gonna have to be careful how we describe this, because that's the second time that impression has been given.
Yeah, and I think that's a great description, Joe. I don't have anything more to add.
I would add, when you get to the regulation standpoint of this, I'm starting to see more cases where attorneys are pointing at needed housing provisions and the requirements to not have discretionary approvals. And so if you're trying to use a PD process to, I know it's so hard to regulate out the bad. You can regulate out the bad. It's hard to regulate in the good, right? But that's our challenge, and we can definitely, like I'm seeing it more and more, and So just a heads up.
Yeah. The assumption here is the clear and objective would be in place. It has to be in place. And so for any master planning, it's done before you're getting to land approvals. Okay, good thoughts. Let's go on to the South Village. Do a little time check here. I think we're doing okay. Oh, just a scale comparison. The North Village area that is shown on the left is about 125 acres. If you overlay that on Woodhaven, it's like it's shown here. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, the South Village is got a couple of other questions that we're exploring. In this concept, we have retained the mixed employment area that was drawn as part of our mixed employment studies last year. And so south of Kruger Road, you can see the wording church and park. That purple area around it would be for flex space, for offices, for retail in some sort of mix, but employment-oriented uses. At the far west end of the drawing, the proposed wine-related development is there because of a specific interest by that property owner. He's been in to see the city. I understand he's been in to see the county as well. Erica, I'll ask you to describe that in a moment. But in this concept, the sort of multifamily and middle housing choices are focused in the area in between, and a small park is inserted to serve them. South of this South Village area, it starts to go uphill even more and gets a little steeper. And so that's why we've drawn the boundary the way we have. Erica, can you fill us in a little bit more on the proposed wine-related development?
Sure. So there is a property owner out there who is very interested in looking at some like farm to table uses, looking at different, hospitality uses for that site as agritourism. And I know that we have talked a lot about that and how do we incorporate those types of uses into this plan. He's actually going to be providing some public comments this evening at the CAC committee. And, his vision is to kind of utilize that land for, farm to table hospitality. Kind of has a grand vision for it out there. Bruce, do you have anything else to add? I know that.
Yeah.
Conversations.
Oh, I guess I'm not on mute, am I?
Nope.
We can hear you. You just went back on mute though.
Now you're on mute.
You think after 2 years I would not do that mistake again. But anyway, he has an interesting vision and background as an executive chef and an owner of apparently a large catering operation in Honolulu, but his family lives in this area. So he's purchased this land as we understand it. And he has a vision for trying to work with the land form and creating some kind of a unique destination that sounds very intriguing to me. And I think, I don't want to speak for Eric, but I think to Erica too, he's asking for a little bit more certainty, and it's kind of hard to give him that certainty at this stage. This is still, we're still in this process, but it does sound like it would be, from my perspective, consistent with the idea of looking at Sherwood more and more as a gateway for Portland into the winelands, into the wine country. And so I know we've been kind of working to sort of pursue this concept with him. And I think he's going to be looking for an architect to bring on to help him with his design. And so he's probably the closest we're sort of hearing, at least I'm sort of hearing, in that particular area of that wine country connection and interest.
Okay. So that's that is concept one. Soumya, anything you'd add?
I don't think so for this one. I think we covered it.
Okay. Let's go to concept two for the South Village. So in this one, we made a different assumption about the mixed employment, is that it would not be a component of this plan, but rather there still would be employment uses, but in different configuration where there is a commercial node that is located where the orange is shown down close to Highway 99. I understand that property owner has been in talking to the city and is kind of interested in that. Some multifamily next to it. That's a good relationship with the retail. Well, we've held the wine-related development up at its location, and then have a little different configuration to the multifamily and the middle housing.
I guess it's worth pointing out with this concept that if we're no longer assuming that sort of broad mixed employment area to the east in those two bubbles to the east, that frees up more room for housing in the South Village.
Right. So I'll be asking for your opinions about that in a minute. But let's go to the third one. The third one is just sort of a variation on that theme where, Glenn, we did what you suggested, was we took the multifamily and broke it into two smaller pieces. We need some guidance on what is the smallest feasible multifamily kind of development. In my kind of looking around new greenfield suburban development, it's more around 4 or 5 acres at minimum. Okay, so let's go back a couple of slides to concept one for the South and get some feedback on mixed employment in this location versus more of the residential and retail choices. And Bruce, maybe I'll look to you. Do you have an opinion or point of view about mixed employment here? And
I'm not sure where you're pointing to. I'm a little confused.
Okay, so let me give you the geography. What's showing on the screen is the land south of the high school.
Oh, okay.
So that's Kruger Road. And go forward about 3 more pages if we could, Kate.
Concept 3.
Hold on. So just to finish the geography, Bruce, what we're talking about is the area shown on this map that is labeled South Village. The purple colored area, that is one of our original set of areas that we thought might be candidates for mixed employment.
Right.
And so I'm asking the question here, do you have some thoughts about whether it ought to stay as mixed employment or whether we ought to look at some options for more multifamily and retail?
You know, I actually think that this is a really potentially good site at a key intersection for some commercial, but it could be some commercial mixed use if the market will allow that, if there's a developer that's interested in that. But I think it has potential, I think, for being a real gateway type project going towards the wine country. And I think if we could attract some kind of, and you know, maybe I'm being too theoretical here, but a mixed use walkable environment, which includes a strong retail component, whether or not it's wine country related or not is to be determined. But I'm not thinking of a standard strip center, that kind of a location. I think it has more potential than that. And I think the owner of the property is open to some, I think they're open to interesting ideas. Obviously it has to pencil in the end, but that would be my thought. I don't know if I've answered the question.
Okay, no, you did in part, actually, that's helpful. Jessica, what are your thoughts?
I was gonna ask about the possibility of mixed use commercial as well. For I guess a couple of reasons, being that there's the high school there, and if they don't have to stay on campus for lunch, it might help them to have some resources available nearby where they wouldn't have to travel on 99 every trip that they leave the high school for.
Mhm.
So, and then when we have visiting schools and things like that, to have options there so we're not burdening 99 with every time somebody wants to go get some food.
Mhm.
And as well as maybe provide that multi-family housing for direct access to the school. I think that that's important as well. So maybe a mixed use idea in that area.
Mhm. You know, it hadn't occurred to me until you mentioned those ideas, but also we have to remember that the high school has quite an employment base in it. I mean, some of them will have 200 staff plus. So they need some place to go get something also that's close by. And we could save some trips and some turning movements out on 99. Glenn.
I almost just echo what Jessica said. That sounds really intriguing. I like that trip capture concept. Before Jessica spoke, I was going to mention that your type of employment profile here could be a difference in the transportation planning rule analysis and application, being that this is an intersection next to the highway with some traffic. So big attractors could be harder to get through. More mitigation is required, as opposed to, like you're saying now, with kind of some intra area capture and more local supportive could help. And also, I think generally we all acknowledge there's a nice, having kids live closer to school is always helpful too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any others? Let's go back through the options here and just open it up to your thoughts on multifamily, middle housing, the park, access, any of the issues with these. Ryan?
Yeah, I have no idea where that heart came from. Oops. Nonetheless, so I guess a couple questions. I need to understand the bigger picture. So we have this north concept and south concept as ideas for planned communities. And what are we doing with all the land west of the high school? Because I know that been discussed in previous meetings. Is that supposed to be just shaded that yellow color as general residential, or?
Yeah, so for now, any of these specific uses that we're kind of testing, there really isn't any one of them that work well west of the high school. So then that leaves residential as being the focus of the area. Some multifamily would frankly work on portions of it. It goes up to it's steep in the upper parts, flattens out as you get to the top of the ridge. So it's a mix of different. I would say the potential is for a mix of different residential, probably in more of the middle housing and lower density choices.
So I think that, okay, that's very informative. And I think that changes how my concern with I think concept one was, where are we going to put housing if we're going to put that much mixed employment? But that makes sense to put mixed employment there, right? For the state reason that everybody else stated. So with the understanding that West is going to offer that, I could be, more supportive of that mixed housing there. I guess the biggest issue for me is it's hard for me to answer these two concepts, north and south, without knowing how we're addressing the total need for housing.
What's in
We're
between?
just going to have to assume a certain number in that West. And so I'm kind of, it's hard for me to make comments or recommendations because I feel like I'm missing a large part of the data that I need to know to make an informed comment even.
Right. Okay. That's fair. Yeah, it's sort of one step at a time here, Ryan, and we need to study that middle area a little bit. I will share that I think the lower portion of it would work well for some multifamily immediately west of the high school. I think we have to be careful of what Glenn was suggesting, that too much multifamily all in one place is not as desirable as having it into some different places and disperse somewhat. But there's a variety of residential that I think it would work west of the high school. Glenn, did you have another comment? Okay. Let's just slowly go through the next 2 pages, look at 2. Any comments specifically on this one? Okay, and 3.
You got me thinking about your wine. This is totally not a relevant point, other than it sounds like a neat idea. I know from folks who operate these facilities outside the UGBs, you're very much limited to the number of events and things like that you can do and the amount of activity you can have. So doing it where you actually have urban services is a pretty cool idea. I think Carlton does just a great job, and I think it's one of the reasons. So sounds kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'd like to add something to that. I think seems very unique in Oregon law compared to another state I worked in that had a large wine country is I found resorts going into unincorporated areas in a wine country and then not going into the city limits. And I think one of the benefits, if I'm understanding it correctly, that you cannot do that as much or maybe at all in terms of lodging and in terms of a mixed use wine type of destination within an unincorporated area. And I could be wrong, but I've been told that a few times. And so I think there's a real opportunity for something like that to happen, particularly because we have an interested property owner in this particular community.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be great to copy like Walla Walla and get a bunch of new tasting rooms into the old downtown too.
Yes.
So there are, I know there are event limits because I have a friend up near Hawksview Vineyard, have a property up there, and another friend of mine runs a Domaine de Broye vineyard, and he's allowed to do like 12 weddings a year, for example, because he's on rural roads that don't have the safety curves engineered and all that good stuff for, and a fire capabilities. So having it with urban services gives you the ability to do that kind of thing.
The other thing that might play into this is that if there's a destination use at the wine site shown on these maps, that provides some more visibility, more traffic, more reason to go to the retail or mixed use that is a little further down Kruger. Okay. Bruce, did you have another one?
Joe, I just had one question. The area, I don't know if it's 3 or 2, I guess it's 2 and 3, the concepts. It shows in the area just south of the high school, it shows the commercial area. And then behind it, it shows, of course, the church and the multifamily. So do we know if that commercial area is, I think it's 16, 17 acres. Does that cover the entire 16 acres? Or do you know the property lines in that area?
We do. Yeah, good question. What's colored here as C, orange, for commercial is far less than that. It is
Okay.
about 4 or 5, I believe.
Oh,
And if we go, so let's go back up to the very first map that has the acreages on it. Soumya, you've got these memorized, I'm sure, but
Yep.
so you can see the 11-acre bubble, which is inclusive of the church. So down close to 99 is, I'll call it 2 bubbles, 11 plus 19. And I don't know the property lines that you're referring to, but if they're the ones down around the church, then it would include the land from Highway 99 up to about that green arrow. So they've got more land than would likely be done for retail.
So, because it just seems to me that 17 acres is a good chunk of land in, whatever that number is, 16 or 17 acres, that really needs some, and I guess this would not be part of this project, but some good master planning that shows how these uses would integrate and because I'd like to maximize as much as possible the amount of so-called employment land. It's, I really think of it as is more of a destination retail. I say destination, but a unique retail opportunity at that location. That's just my thought. So, but I can also see the opportunities for some walkable, mixed use in there too. I just didn't know if we would be limited just to the 5 acres then for the commercial based on this map.
Right. I'd characterize the 5 acres that we colored as really just a first cut.
Yeah, okay. I know it's not a zoning map. I get it.
Right.
Thanks.
Let me see if I can kind of summarize what I've heard so far. And Soumya and Kate, I'll invite you to add to this. This is not going to be really super organized, but let me take a shot here. In terms of the larger public uses in the North Village, what I was hearing, if we work from the premise that the putting all 3 schools up in that area, let's just go to that map if we could. Putting all 3 schools together is not really the way to go. Then as we work towards alternatives, we should include the following in the alternatives. At least one that keeps it north of Haiti. And then another one that takes a look at the location more north of Chicken Creek. So either as part of the employment area up there or in that area that isn't colored as part of the employment. I didn't hear any kind of disagreement with the elementary school. So I think we would hold the elementary school in the various options here for the alternatives that we'll work on.
Sorry, can I jump in real quick on the ES on the elementary school?
Yeah.
I heard in the chat some thoughts about maybe exploring the area just west of Sherwood High School as a potential alternative location for the elementary school. And I think there's some merit to that idea since there aren't major public streets that might be cutting through there, and it might make sense from the school district perspective.
And did you just say to the west of the high school?
That's
Soumya?
right. Yep. In that sliver of land, it's about 18 acres shown between the high school and the road that we've shown north-south.
Okay. That would probably be the steepest elementary school I've ever seen, but
it's steep, but it's about similar, I think, to some of the areas just north of Haiti.
okay. It's an option. Bruce, something on that issue?
Well, something on the middle school. Just once again, I just wanted to kind of say that I don't know. I just want to say, I mean, the idea of the middle school going north, I do think it should be in an area where there's more, well, frankly, west of Elwood. I'm just throwing this out because I think if it goes in the middle of the prime jobs land, it's going to be harder to get the jobs in place.
Right.
That's just my thought. But I also would love to be exploring what the market thinks about that idea in terms of whether it's a pro or a con. I don't know the answer to that. I've not seen it done. You know, in a I'm going to call it a tech park type environment. So, but there may be options that I just don't understand yet.
Okay. I think that's reasonable to make the list. One of the kind of the opportunities we have here is that we are going to draw alternatives. So we can organize all these choices on some different plans and see what we think when we get together next time. Moving to the community park, I took away from our conversation that we ought to continue to study the 2 locations that have been shown here, the one in concept 2 and the one in concept 1. Little more favor towards 2, at least from folks that spoke up. And I think we'll work with Kristen to see if there's a third somewhere else that and the rest of the city team, see whether there's a third that we ought to explore. On the housing, of course, we have to do more work across the whole study area. But I want to build off of the perspective of kind of what our strategy is for middle housing and for multifamily. And for multifamily, I think we ought to pick up on the idea of dispersing it to some smaller components. By the way, 10 acres that you're seeing on these maps would be somewhere in the area of 200, 250, or even more housing units. Pretty common, frankly, for apartment development, but going smaller than that, because that feels a little bit more like Sherwood.
Yeah,
And-
Beaverton's South Cooper Mountain, Joe, for reference, the stuff by the high school there went in at 40 units to the acre.
Right. Yeah. On the middle housing, I think we ought to continue exploring different ways and sort of to envision it. And here is kind of three that might give us some choices. One is what I would call focused middle housing, like we've done on these maps, to actually create a middle housing zone and take a look at what that might be and in terms of a total plan. The other would be to not do that, to take more the point of view of dispersed middle housing and kind of the paradigm that it can and should be everywhere. It'll be allowed everywhere. We don't know what the market will deliver, but take more of a dispersed approach. And then the third would be more of a very intentional master plan approach, where you're intending to get an outcome like Villebois, which has the individual block faces and kind of a high level of detail. Does that sound like an appropriate way to organize how we look at middle housing and the upcoming alternatives? Any thoughts on that?
Well, Joe, it sounds like a more complicated process. I think this will make this city the only one that's actually going down where they're gonna have to figure out how much is available in the total area rather than just allowing it across single family.
Right.
I mean, this is basically going down a bespoke path that's contemplated in the legislation, but I don't know of any jurisdiction that's doing it to comply.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's not actually necessarily a critique of either thing. I just just a statement.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly don't want to create Rubik's Cube here where we have so many colors moving around. Okay, we'll see where it goes with the CAC tonight on that. Then my summary in the South Village would be that I think the three general ideas that we've shown so far, but maybe a little bit of a variation on them, should be carried forward. One that is the mixed employment.
Hey, Joe, before you get too far, it looks like Jessica has her hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jessica.
Oh, thank you. I was curious, and I'm sorry if you mentioned this already, but what's the approach in the rest of the city for the middle housing? And so the follow-up question is, would this area be treated differently, or would the approach that the rest of the city has taken be spread out to this new area?
Good question. Erica or
So
Joy?
the approach now with middle housing in the city is that middle housing types are allowed in all, single family residential zones. So this is actually taking kind of a different approach. Well, at least it could take a different approach in creating kind of that middle housing zone or doing some sort of master plan development that would take into account middle housing and, possibly other housing types.
Were you asking that just informationally?
Yeah, I think primarily informationally, but it's also an interesting idea to make this. I mean, I don't think it's anyone's intent to make it like an exclusive thing, right? But I think when we start thinking about like going back to what Ryan has been saying about making separate areas for specifically for middle housing or multifamily, that instead of dispersing it everywhere as kind of the intention of the
Right.
legislature. So I'm curious about the approach.
Yeah. The other curiosity I have is what will be the outcome if you take a more dispersed approach? And so basically you end up with something like a middle multifamily zone and then a more mixed residential zone throughout the rest of the area. Does it raise the possibility that you won't get any middle housing?
Joe, my comment to that is you're absolutely correct, because it's going to be driven by the development community. Since the legislation that we are proposing is going to allow middle housing anywhere where residentially zoning is allowed. So our fear, not so much as fear, but with Sherwood West, again, middle housing is going to be driven by the development community on exactly what they would like to build. We're providing housing choices, but it doesn't mean the development community would grab onto those.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, first I'll make a statement. Development community does not make choices on what to build. The market makes choices on what to build, and then we build accordingly. And there is a demand for housing, a very high demand. We're 60,000 units short in Metro Portland. So I already have a lot of members that are interested in middle housing. So an assumption that by not creating middle housing areas exclusive, that there's not going to be middle housing created is, I think, it's an assumption. I don't know if I'd be willing to go there yet, because every jurisdiction I'm right now, I'm pushing pretty hard for allowing for a lot of opportunities for middle housing. And so I know that's a direction I have for my industry. So just a statement.
Okay. Let's see. So I see any other hands up. I was moving to the south area, and it seems like a mixed employment option, a mixed use option. I'm thinking more in the south area there, or the eastern area. Pretty strong interest in that. And frankly, the way we've drawn it here with the orange and the multifamily, that together might be a more mixed use combined area down in that area. So we'd have a mixed employment and a mixed use option. And maybe this is a third. Soumya or Kate? I know I was making some interpretations there of what we heard, but what else are in your notes as things we ought to be looking at?
In terms of the employment question, I think that pretty much sums it up. I heard a lot of support for sort of the mixed use commercial node there along the highway. And just a lot of support for, kind of supporting that wine related development on the west side.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and I think, Joe, you mentioned this earlier, but just continuing to describe these studies as part of a larger whole and not separate from the other land uses that will inevitably be on the map.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate that on that agenda item. Erica, I'll turn it over to you for the engagement item.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. So we heard from the CAC at the last meeting, kind of what the city is doing in regards to engagement activities out there. And so in the last half year packet, I described the engagement activities that we are currently undertaking and have been undertaking and will continue to be undertaking over the next couple of months. Just to let you all know that I am personally going out and kind of talking to different community groups about the Sherwood West project to get more input. I'm going to be speaking to Rotary next month. I actually have reached out to a couple of neighbors this past week to see if they would like to host like a small coffee klatch with neighbors to get information kind of on a small personal level, to meet them where they are. So we continue just to really, we're continuing with our public outreach in every form and manner that we can. So we just want to make that known to folks. Oftentimes, I think, some CAC members don't realize how much we are doing on the public engagement side. So.
Okay.
If you have any questions about any of the activities that we've listed or will continue to do, or have any ideas about, our coffee klatch kind of engagement with neighbors. And, this engagement is going to be going on, longer than just the concept planning itself. Then we get into the, UGB expansion and, the annexation process. There's going to be a lot more community involvement over the next couple of years and really kind of educating folks about all these land use processes. And so this is just one little moment in time here for the engagement activities that we're doing. But another thing that we could be looking at in the future is maybe, hiring a public engagement, firm, and kind of helping us really drive, some of these messages out to the community as well. And just helping with public engagement, as too. We have a pretty small staff here in Sherwood, and doing some of these public engagement activities, takes a lot of time and effort.
Any comments or thoughts on engagement? Okay. Erica, let's move on to next steps.
Great. So next steps here, we are thinking of having another meeting in April, I believe. And I know that we typically meet on Wednesdays, but we have a scheduling conflict, and we're wondering if April 21st, which is a Thursday, would work for folks. We don't have to have an answer right this very minute, but I'm throwing it out there, and I'll send out an email and touch base with all of you.
Just to clarify, Erica, you're thinking the same time though?
Yes.
Thank you.
What was that date again, Erica?
April 21st, which is a Thursday.
Not hearing any no's.
Oh,
bunch of thumbs up.
Yeah, Joe and Eric, you want to answer? It's good for me. I don't
Yeah. Looks like we could get a good group. We'll check in with the CAC also. Erica, anything else on the next steps list?
Not that I could think of, unless you have anything to add, Joe.
No, I think I've said it throughout the meeting. So we'll our goal is to draw up some alternatives for the next meeting. So we'll see if the CAC is happy with that direction as the next thing. Okay, then I would say, thank you, everybody. Let's call it good. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Nice meeting
Thanks.
everyone. Good to see you.
All right.
Yeah.
See ya.